The elevator doors groaned open and I froze mid-step, my hand still pressed against the folder in my apron. Fingers tense, paper edges digging into my palm. Dominic Vale stood just inside, pale gray eyes fixed on me, one hand resting lightly against the brass door, the other tucked near his jacket pocket. The hum of the hotel lights filled the silence, broken only by the soft click of my shoes on the marble floor. My heart raced as I noticed a glint behind his feet, a black phone partially exposed from under a folded towel on the cart I had abandoned in my hurry. I shifted slightly, hoping my movement would not betray my panic, the sound of the phone buzzing faint but insistent against the metal and tile. Dominic did not move or speak, but the weight of his gaze pressed against my shoulders, steady, unyielding. I swallowed and adjusted the strap of my apron, thumb brushing the edge of my housekeeping badge, an anchor in the midst of the unknown. His eyes flicked to the phone, then back to mine, and I realized the smallest motion, finger on the folder, a tilt of the head, the way I avoided meeting his gaze, was being read like a page of my thoughts. The elevator shifted slightly beneath us, cables humming, and I took one careful step back, the papers rustling softly. Dominic's lips moved almost imperceptibly, forming words I could not hear, and I felt the choice pressing against my chest. Step forward and risk exposure, or retreat and risk what might be waiting behind me. Every heartbeat marked the tension, every small noise amplified in the confined space. And I realized that in the flicker of the overhead light, I was not just a witness. I was a participant in a scene that could collapse under a single misstep. I pressed the folder to my chest again, breathing shallow, calculating, as Dominic's eyes never left mine, reading, assessing, waiting. The elevator doors began their slow slide shut, and I held my position, aware that each second counted, that the next action I took could define what came next. Who controlled the night, and whether I remained unseen or finally irrevocably exposed. The doors stopped 1 inch from closing. Not because I touched them, not because Dominic did. Someone on the other side had pressed the call button, and the small sound of that interruption made my stomach fold in on itself. Dominic's hand moved first, not toward me, not toward the phone under the towel, but to the control panel. He pressed the hold button with his knuckle, and kept his body angled between me and the hallway. "Do not step out," he said. His voice was low enough to feel private, but it did not feel kind. It felt like an order wrapped around a warning. I looked past his shoulder through the narrow gap. A man in a Navy hotel suit stood outside the elevator with one hand raised, smiling like he had walked into an ordinary inconvenience. Ethan Cross. I had seen him twice before, always beside men who owned things, always carrying leather folders thin enough to look harmless and thick enough to ruin lives. "Dominic," he said, still smiling, "there you are." Then his attention shifted to me, not surprised, not curious. Prepared. That was the first thing that scared me more than the gun-shaped shadow my mind had been inventing behind every polished surface. Ethan looked at me like I had arrived exactly on schedule. I tightened my grip on the folder against my chest. The top page bent under my thumb. Dominic noticed Ethan's eyes drop to it. "This elevator is occupied," Dominic said. Ethan's smile thinned. "By your witness?" The word struck the brass walls and came back at me colder. Witness. I had not said what I saw. I had not even understood what I saw. But Ethan had named me before anyone asked a question. Dominic's posture changed by 1/2 inch. His shoulders stayed relaxed, but the air around him seemed to harden. "Careful," he said. Ethan lifted both hands, a neat little gesture of peace that did not reach his face. "I am only trying to keep this clean. The police are already downstairs." A woman leaving the restricted floor with archived access records and a concealed does not look good. My mouth went dry. "Police?" I heard myself ask. Ethan gave me the gentle look men use when they want witnesses to feel small. "Miss Bennett, you opened a door you were not authorized to open." The folder slipped lower in my hands. I saw the security stamp on the top sheet: basement transfer logs, time codes, vehicle arrivals. I had been told to bring them to storage. By a request signed with Ethan's name, my thumb slid along the page until it found the printed line, "Requested by E. Cross." I looked up slowly. Dominic saw the page before Ethan did. His gaze moved once, quick and sharp, from the folder to Ethan's face. "You sent her down here," Dominic said. Ethan did not answer right away. That pause was tiny, maybe less than a second, but it was the first honest thing he had given us. Behind him, the hallway light flickered over two uniformed officers near the corner. One of them watched me too closely. The other kept his hand near his radio. I understood then that the elevator was not an exit, it was a stage. If I stepped out with the folder, I became the clerk fleeing with evidence. If I stayed inside with Dominic, I became the woman protected by the man they wanted to frame. Either way, someone had already written my part. Dominic reached beside me, picked up the black phone from under the towel, and held it where Ethan could see the blank screen. "Who planted this?" Ethan sighed softly. "Dominic, do not make this worse." I looked at the folder, then at the officers, then at Dominic's hand holding the device he had not tried to hide. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I want to know why his name was not on the request." Ethan's eyes narrowed. Dominic turned his head toward me, and for the first time, he stopped looking at me like a problem. He looked at me like I had just moved a piece on a board he did not know I could see. "Step out with your hands visible," one of the officers called from the hallway. He said it politely, which somehow made the request feel less like help and more like a receipt already printed. Ethan moved aside just enough to give me a path, his leather folder tucked under one arm, his smile clean and patient. Dominic did not block the doorway anymore. He watched the officer, then the security camera above the elevator, then the little green light on the panel beside my shoulder. "Recording, still recording." "Miss Bennett," Ethan said, "this can stay simple if you cooperate." I almost laughed. Simple was a word men used when they had already made the complicated parts someone else's problem. My right thumb stayed on the bent corner of the transfer log. The paper had started to soften from the sweat in my hand. I could feel Dominic beside me, quiet, waiting, not rescuing me from the decision. That angered me until I realized why. If he spoke for me, Ethan would use it. If he pulled me behind him, the officers would see exactly what they came to see. A frightened woman under a criminal's control. So I stepped out first. The hallway seemed too bright after the elevator. One officer looked at the folder pressed to my chest. The other looked at Dominic's hand, still holding the black phone like evidence he wanted witnessed. Ethan extended his palm toward me. The documents clear, my name in his mouth felt wrong. Too familiar for a man who should have known me only from payroll forms and archive requests. I did not give him the folder. "You said I opened a door I was not authorized to open." Ethan's smile barely moved. "You did." I turned the top page toward the officer nearest me. "Then why does your request tell me to bring these records to basement storage?" The officer leaned in. Ethan's hand tightened around his folder. It was small, but I saw it. Dominic saw it too. The officer read the page, then glanced at Ethan. "This has your authorization." "A clerical routing error," Ethan said smoothly. She misunderstood. That word did something to me. Misunderstood. I had heard it at my last job, after I reported missing medication logs and suddenly became the difficult woman who confused dates, exaggerated tone, read too much into signatures. The old shame rose so fast I tasted metal. I looked down at the page before my face could betray me. Dominic's voice came from behind my left shoulder. "Do not shrink for him." He did not say it loudly. He did not say it kindly. He said it like a fact I had forgotten and he was returning. My fingers uncurled from the folder one at a time. I took out the second page. "There are 2 timestamps," I said. The email came at 10:42, but the access code attached to it was created at 10:19. Before I was assigned the task, Ethan's eyes went flat. The officer took the page fully now. I kept going because if I stopped, I would never start again. Someone prepared the basement access before I was told to go there. Someone wanted me in that hallway. The black phone in Dominic's hand lit up. None of us touched it. The screen showed a new message preview. "Is she with him yet?" Ethan's face did not change. That was his mistake. Innocent people look confused before they look insulted. He went straight to insulted. The officer saw it. Dominic placed the phone on the narrow console table by the elevator, screen facing up, and stepped back from it. "Chain of custody," he said. The words made Ethan blink. For the first time, the man with all the papers had no paper ready. I looked at Dominic then, just once. He was not softer, he was not safe, but he had made room for my voice without taking it. And in that bright hallway, with 2 officers watching, and Ethan's careful story beginning to fray, that felt more dangerous to him than any threat Dominic could have made. The hallway outside the storage room was silent, except for the low hum of the security cameras, and I held the folder tighter against my chest as Dominic stepped just behind me. Not blocking, not guiding, just present. The black phone on the console buzzed once, soft enough to be mistaken for an ambient beep, but I felt the vibration in the floor. I glanced down and noticed a folded receipt poking from under the cart, edges curling slightly, the stamp from Ethan's firm clear against the paper. I bent to pick it up, careful not to shift the towel covering the phone, and my fingers brushed the corner of the document, cold ink against warm skin. Dominic's eyes flicked to my hand, a subtle lift of the brow acknowledging the discovery without a word. I read the timestamp silently, a mismatch from the main access log, then straightened, slipping the receipt into the folder. Ethan stepped forward from the shadows of the stairwell, his leather folder tucked under one arm, trying to appear casual, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of impatience. "I would have thought you'd be more careful," he said, voice low, meant for Dominic but carrying to me. Dominic didn't answer. He only shifted slightly, the movement enough to block Ethan's line without touching me, and I realized I could see both men now in one glance, every reaction telling more than their words. The elevator call button blinked again. I let my thumb rest over the edge of the folder, feeling the weight of choices. Dominic's hand drifted to the phone's screen, tilting it just enough so I could see the preview message. Confirm her route. The hallway felt narrower, the shadows stretching longer, Ethan's stance stiffening. I took a slow breath, moving the folders slightly to reveal the receipt to Dominic without showing Ethan, a silent act of alignment. He nodded just once, subtle, precise. Ethan blinked, caught in that moment, realizing the partial exposure had shifted control. The black phone buzzed a second time, but Dominic ignored it, eyes locked on Ethan, whose lips pressed together tight, a small but telling tremor in his hand. I felt the tension coil like a wire around my ribs. I had become the pivot. Every breath, every micro motion of hands or eyelids communicated strategy, evidence, and intent. The choice was mine. Stay visible and preserve the chain of evidence, or retreat and risk Ethan reclaiming control. I shifted a step forward, placing the folder against the console where both men could see the receipt, letting the weight of the paper do what words could not, and the hallway held its breath, the silence sharp, electric, waiting for the next move to break it. Dominic did not take the receipt from my hand. He looked at it, read the stamp, read the time, then looked at me as if the paper had changed the shape of my face. Not softened him, not convinced him of everything, just forced him to stop treating me like a piece of damage to be contained. Ethan reached for the receipt with 2 fingers. "I will handle that." I pulled it back before he touched it. The movement was small, but it cut through the hallway like a snapped thread. One officer shifted his weight. The other lowered his hand from his radio. Ethan's smile stayed in place, but his eyes went colder. "Miss Bennett, you are interfering with a legal review." My thumb pressed against the edge of the paper until it bent. "Then review it where the camera can see your hands." For 1 second, nobody spoke. I heard the old elevator cables moving somewhere behind the wall. I heard my own breath, uneven but still mine. Dominic moved then, not in front of me, not between me and Ethan, but beside me, close enough that his sleeve nearly touched mine. He set the black phone on the console next to the receipt and turned both screens toward the hallway camera. "She is right," he said. 2 words, praise, no warmth. But they landed under my ribs with a force I did not know how to name. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You are trusting a records clerk who broke protocol? I am listening to the only person in this hallway who has not tried to take evidence out of frame." Dominic's voice stayed calm. The officer nearest the console glanced at the receipt. "This says the transfer authorization printed at 10:17. I nodded. The access code was created at 10:19. The email assigning me to move the folder came at 10:42. The police were called at 11:12. I stopped because my mouth had gone dry. Dominic reached toward his jacket and I flinched before I could hide it. He noticed. His hand paused in the air, then changed direction and picked up a sealed bottle of water from the cart instead. He set it beside my folder without looking at me too directly. Not an apology, not a performance, just a correction. I unscrewed the cap with fingers that still shook and took one sip. Ethan watched that tiny exchange like it offended him. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Dominic, she saw you in the garage with a body on the floor and a weapon within reach. Are we pretending that does not matter?" The officer looked back at me. So did Dominic. This time he did not rescue me from the question, he let it stand. My shame rose again, hot and familiar, because Ethan had made it sound simple, and simple lies were the easiest to believe. I looked at the floor until the pattern in the carpet stopped swimming. "I saw him standing there," I said. "I saw the black sedan. I saw something on the table. I saw a man on the ground." Ethan's mouth lifted. Then I added, "I did not see what happened before I opened the door." The small lift disappeared. Dominic looked away first, toward the camera, giving me privacy inside a room full of witnesses. That restraint steadied me more than his protection had. One of his men came from the service corridor carrying a tablet. "Garage feed," he said. 3-minute loop between 10:59 and 11:02. Same employee crosses frame twice with the same linen cart. I almost dropped the water. The loop. My receipt had not solved the story, it had opened it. Dominic took the tablet, then handed it to me before Ethan could object. "Show them," he said, "not tell them. Not stand behind me while he explained. Show them." My fingers closed around the tablet, and for the first time that night, the evidence was not something being pulled from me. It was something I was allowed to hold. The conference room was tense, silent except for the low hum of the air vents and the faint tapping of a pen against a folder Ethan had left on the table. I held the tablet in both hands, the looped footage still playing, showing the same employee crossing the garage twice with the linen cart. The timestamp blinking, 10:59 to 11:02. Dominic stood beside me, not too close, allowing me the space to act. His pale gray eyes scanning the room and the faces of the officers and staff watching the demonstration. Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time all night, his calm cracked. "This is irrelevant," he said, voice quieter than before, a controlled annoyance that still carried authority. I scrolled the footage slowly, pointing to the repeated frames, letting the action speak. Every glance from the officers and observers fell on me. Dominic's hand hovered near the console but did not move. He trusted me to lead this step, to present the evidence myself. I felt the weight of that trust more acutely than the threat of Ethan's gaze. The black phone on the console buzzed again, and I ignored it, letting the visual evidence maintain the narrative. One officer leaned forward. "So this access code was active before her assignment," I said, voice steady. Ethan looked at Dominic, then back at me, realizing the partial exposure had shifted control. Dominic nodded once, subtly, acknowledging the alignment without stepping into the spotlight. I felt my chest tighten, not with fear but with the pulse of responsibility. The employees in the room shifted slightly, whispers suppressed, their attention drawn to the proof, the chain of custody, and the irregularity Ethan had tried to hide. Dominic's sleeve brushed mine briefly as he adjusted a folder, a gesture small enough to be unnoticed by others but potent in its silent support. I exhaled and continued through the footage, showing each repeated frame, each timestamp discrepancy, letting the pattern emerge naturally. Ethan's mouth opened and closed. He tried to maintain composure, but the gap between intention and exposure had grown too large. I saw Dominic's eyes track every micro-expression of Ethan's, catching the moment the man realized his setup was unraveling. The social pressure in the room thickened, palpable, as observers weighed the evidence against authority, and I recognized the shift. I was no longer merely a witness to someone else's power struggle. I was a participant in revealing it, and Dominic's silent affirmation gave me the courage to maintain the narrative, to let the evidence, the timing, and the subtle movement speak louder than any word could. Each person's attention focused, the consequences of inaction or misstatement hanging in the air, and for the first time that night, the tension became a controlled force, shaping the actions of everyone in the room. Dominic did not command. He allowed the situation to unfold, and through that restraint, he shielded me while asserting authority, creating a space where truth could emerge, choice could be exercised, and the balance of power subtly but irrevocably shifted. Ryan Keller arrived with his badge already in his hand. That was the first thing I noticed, not clipped to his belt, not pulled out after anyone asked. Already displayed, angled outward, polished under the conference room lights like a shortcut to trust. He stepped inside behind one of the officers, mid-40s, neat haircut, tired eyes, the kind of man who looked reasonable enough to make unreasonable requests sound official. Ethan's shoulders lowered when he saw him, not much, just a private breath of relief that came too soon. Dominic saw it. I saw it. Ryan looked at the tablet in my hands and then at the black phone on the console. "Miss Bennett," he said, gentle, careful. "I think it would be best if you and I spoke alone." The room shifted around that word. My fingers tightened on the tablet until the case creaked softly. Dominic did not answer for me. He looked at me once, then looked away, as if giving me the room to decide in front of everyone. That restraint still felt unfamiliar. Ethan slid his folder closed. Detective Keller can arrange protection outside this building. Protection. Another pretty word that could become a locked door if spoken by the wrong man. Ryan stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel confidential. "You do not have to stay under his influence." His eyes moved briefly toward Dominic. "You saw enough tonight. Just tell us what you saw in the garage and we can get you somewhere safe." I looked at the tablet. The paused frame showed the same linen cart crossing the same concrete lane twice, 3 minutes apart, exact angle, exact wheel position, exact fold of towel on top. My job had taught me that people rarely notice repetition, unless they are paid to reset rooms to the same condition every day. Ryan's pen hovered over his small notepad. "You saw Mr. Vale standing near the weapon, correct?" I looked up. The question sounded harmless. It was not. "I saw him standing near a table," I said. "And there was a weapon on that table." There was something on the table. Ryan's pen moved before I finished. I watched the ink drag across the page. He was writing fast than I was speaking. Ethan stood very still by the door. Dominic's face gave away nothing, but his left hand rested flat on the table now, not clenched, not moving. "Miss Bennett," Ryan said, a little less gentle. "This is not the time to protect him." The shame came hot and immediate, because that was how traps worked. They gave you only 2 roles, victim or accomplice, liar or possession. I set the tablet down carefully, screen still facing the officers. "I am not protecting him." My voice stayed quieter than I expected. "I am protecting the part I actually saw." Ryan's pen stopped. The black phone buzzed on the console. No one reached for it. The screen lit with a preview that only faced me, because Dominic had turned it earlier toward the camera. Get her to say he held it. Ryan's eyes flicked down before he remembered not to look. There it was, so small, so human. Ethan closed his eyes for less than a second. The room did not explode. Nobody shouted. That was what made it worse. The truth entered quietly and took a chair. I picked up my own phone from the table where the officer had returned it, opened the voice memo app, and saw the red recording line still running from the moment Ryan walked in. My thumb hovered over stop, then did not press it yet. "Detective," I said, and this time every person in the conference room looked at me. "Could you repeat the question exactly the way you wanted me to answer it?" The room went silent the moment I lifted the tablet. The video loop played once more, showing the repeated passage of the linen cart, timestamp discrepancies, and the same angles that only a careful observer could catch. Ethan's eyes widened subtly, just enough to betray that he had not expected me to notice the 3-minute loop before he asked his question. Ryan's hand paused midair over the notepad, pen hovering, the authority he carried faltering in the weight of what I had revealed. Dominic leaned back slightly, pale gray eyes fixed on Ethan, lips barely parted, not speaking, letting the silence carry the evidence weight. I tilted the tablet toward the center of the room, fingers pressing lightly on the edge so everyone could see both the repeated frames and the timestamp, the screen catching the overhead light and reflecting faintly in the polished floor. Ethan's breath caught, and for a fraction of a second, the carefully constructed calm that had surrounded him all night cracked. One of the officers in the corner looked down at the folder I had set beside the tablet, noting the printed times, the chain of custody stamps, the misaligned codes. Dominic's hand rested next to mine, steady but not intrusive, a silent confirmation that this evidence was valid and that I controlled the story for the moment. The black phone buzzed on the console. Dominic did not touch it. He let it sit as a testament to control without interference. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, then shut it again, realizing that any words would now be an attempt to deny what was clearly on display. Ryan glanced at the screen, then at Ethan and back at me, the gravity settling across his face as if the room had suddenly thickened with the truth. All eyes were on the loop, the timestamps, the repeated frames. The quiet had become oppressive in its weight. I pressed the tablet a little closer to the center, letting the evidence, my own calm, and the weight of the silence force the room into attention. Ethan's fingers fidgeted with his folder, subtle but noticeable, his confidence draining. Dominic's eyes remained on him, unreadable, unyielding, and for the first time, Ethan understood he had miscalculated. The room held its breath, every observer frozen, not in shock but in the quiet acknowledgement that the narrative had shifted irrevocably. I exhaled softly, letting the tension linger, the evidence speaking louder than any accusation, and the black phone on the console pulsed gently with unread messages, a silent witness to the truth as it finally stood exposed. The hearing moved upstairs at dawn because Dominic refused to let the night end in a hallway. Not a courtroom, not yet. Just a private boardroom with glass walls, tired attorneys, 2 hotel executives, both officers, and Ryan Keller sitting very still with his badge face down on the table. Ethan Cross stood near the windows, his tie straight, his folder closed, his face arranged into the calm of a man still searching for one clean exit. I sat at the far end of the table with the tablet in front of me, the black phone sealed in an evidence bag beside it, and my own voice memo queued on speaker. My hands were cold. I kept them flat on the table so nobody could see them shake. Dominic sat 2 chairs away, not beside me. That was deliberate. I knew it because he glanced once at the empty chair between us, then left it empty. Space, for once, was not distance. It was respect. The attorney played the recording. Ryan's voice filled the room, gentle at first, then narrower, guiding me toward words I had never said. "You saw Mr. Vale holding it, correct?" Then the black phone message appeared on the tablet screen, time-stamped within seconds of his question. Get her to say he held it. Nobody interrupted. Nobody asked me to explain what the room could already understand. Ethan looked at Ryan. Ryan did not look back. That was the moment the partnership broke, not with shouting. With one man refusing to share another man's fall, the attorney opened Ethan's folder next. The marriage documents were inside, printed at 10:31, 11 minutes before the email assigning me to basement storage, 28 minutes before I ever opened the garage door. My name was already typed in. Dominic's signature line was already marked. My stomach turned, not from shock exactly, but from the ugly precision of it. They had not reacted to me. They had prepared me. Dominic's hand closed once on the edge of his chair, then released. He did not look at me while the attorney read the timeline. Maybe he knew that if he did, whatever was still controlled in his face might not stay there. Ethan finally spoke. Protective paperwork, drafted in anticipation of risk. His voice was smooth but too thin now. I picked up the pen in front of me and set it across the printed contract covering my own name. Before I became a risk, the question stayed in the air. Ethan had no answer that did not condemn him. By 8 o'clock, Ryan had been escorted out by internal affairs. Ethan was removed by counsel pending a full investigation, his leather folder left behind on the table like a shed skin. The officers took my statement again, and this time, nobody fed me words. I said what I had said from the beginning. I saw a table, I saw an object on it, I saw Dominic Vale standing there. I did not see him use it. When I finished, the older officer closed his notebook and nodded once, not warmly but correctly. Correct felt better than kind. Later, in the underground garage, the same place where the night had started, Dominic handed me an envelope. "Annulment papers," he said. "Signed, filed when you choose." I looked at the envelope, then at him. His charcoal suit was still perfect, but the cuff at his wrist was slightly wrinkled, where his hand had clenched in the boardroom. That small flaw made him look less like a verdict, and more like a man who had finally understood the cost of deciding for someone else. "You are not asking me to stay," I said. His eyes moved to the elevator doors, then back to me. No, the word was quiet, hard for him, honest. He opened the passenger door of the waiting car and stepped back from it, not guiding, not claiming, just opening. I held the envelope against my chest. the same way I had held the folder hours earlier, but this time my fingers did not bend the paper. Before I got in, I slipped the ring from my hand and placed it in his palm. He looked down at it as if it weighed more than metal. "If you ever need the truth again," I said, "ask before you cage it." He closed his fingers around the ring, not to keep me, but to accept what it meant. Then he stepped back another pace. I got into the car by myself. As it pulled away, I watched him through the rear window, standing under the pale garage lights with one hand open at his side, the door behind him unlocked. And for the first time all night, no one blocking the exit.